You're watching Medfield TV.
Good morning and welcome to the Halloween edition of the Medfield Board of Selectmen's meeting. We have a relatively short agenda this morning, so I think this will be a short meeting. As we come to order, I'd like to just remind everybody in the audience that this is being videotaped and live streamed? Not live streamed, but videotaped. So if you do have anything you'd like to say, please make sure that you grab a microphone, identify yourself. And again, the microphone, everybody here knows this, but the microphone is intended to pick up the audio for the Medfield TV. It's not a broadcast. Before we start, if we could just take a moment to of appreciation for our service members serving across the globe to protect our country. Thank you. Okay. First item on the agenda is citizen comment. We don't have anybody scheduled to talk, so I think we're past that. The next item that we have is to talk about the special town meeting articles. There are two articles, Cable 8 appropriation of money coming in from the cable companies and officially, I guess, administratively and legally transferring the funds for Cable 8 through taxpayer approval of that transfer of funds, which is a new requirement of the law to get the money for Cable TV 8 or Medfield Cable TV to get the money that they're supposed to be getting in the first place. And the second is the article on rezoning the state hospital property. So I'll open it up for discussion. So starting with, I guess, Mike, you first.
So are we going to talk about the statement too?
We can do, yep.
If you wanted to do that. So I think on the statement that you wrote, I think it's better than the first draft. I think it needed to be more affirmative. The only thing is I'd like to take out the two unanimously's in the second rather than wordsmith what you've written, because I don't know that I'd quite characterize my position on this the same way as you would.
I know that, but
so
we have not unanimously endorsed. I'm trying to think.
I'm in favor of the article, right? But
right.
I'm not urging people to approve it, and I don't agree with the statement in the second to last paragraph.
Okay, can you have you marked up the way you wanted to?
Yeah. So if you just took those two out, that wouldn't water down your language at all. Just the two unanimously.
I actually added that in reaction to the earlier comment that it wasn't enthusiastic enough. So.
No, I think,
okay.
It should be enthusiastic because the
right.
Board of Selectmen as a board is enthusiastic about this plan and should be enthusiastically endorsing it.
So at this time, I'm just getting rid of the word unanimously in the fourth paragraph and
in the last paragraph.
And unanimously.
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, I'm in favor of the article, but not for the same reasons you are, and not on the same basis. And at Todd's request, Todd had asked me to write something kind of laying out.
So just to be clear, it says, the first one says, all three of us believe it's appropriate for the town to move ahead. We're taking out that it's
unanimously.
Not unanimous.
Correct.
And
right. I've made pretty clear that.
And we're not unanimously urging people to approve the articles.
Right. I'm in favor of it. I think if people, depending on their values and what they value at the property, are in favor of it, I'd like to see proposals in response. But as I said, I think I understand why people would be against it too. That's the only change I have.
Okay. Any changes, Pete?
I had some changes that I sent back to Chris. I don't know if those ever got back to you.
Those have not been incorporated because Gus did a new draft, so I didn't incorporate the old ones.
So are they?
I have them.
Are they administrative enough that I can let you work from the draft I sent you and you can just use your judgment, or are they substantive?
No, I think they're.
Okay.
So
I'm happy without having even seen them.
All right.
To trust Chris. And the only thing I'm trying to get out of the loop of being the editor, if I don't need to be the editor.
Yeah,
So I'm comfortable letting that. So
it's just one of those problem areas of my not being able to send it directly to you outside a meeting. So
no, that's fine. So should we take a vote to approve the amended statement, or is that required even?
so moved.
Yeah, it's a message from you, but if you want our approval of it, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean.
It's usually, the warrant report is usually signed by all three selectmen.
Yeah.
Are we leaving it as three, or you want
Yeah,
to do it
no,
as
let's
just
leave
the
it as
chairman?
3. Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
So second, all those, if we take a vote.
Second, yep.
All those in favor?
Yep.
Aye.
Done. Okay.
And I will send a final version of that before
Okay.
it goes
Okay.
to print.
Okay.
Yep.
And if you need my help, I'm more than happy to help. I'm just trying to not be the gate. Okay. The Cable 8, let's start with Cable 8 appropriation. Any discussions on the Cable 8 article?
Nope.
This is purely housekeeping.
I know, yeah. And it might make sense for us to vote on the articles individually, so
Absolutely.
entertain a motion.
I would
to-
move to support Article 1.
Okay.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Done, okay. And then the second article on the Medfield State Housing zoning, guess we'll start with comments from the Board of Selectmen and then open it up if there's any other, if there's questions or comments from the audience.
Yeah. So as I said, I'm going to support, voting for this article at the town meeting. Todd Triabenko had asked if I would put together sort of my kind of position on this and send it out. So I'll be doing that over the next kind of week or so. I mean, I think my perspective is the same as it's been, which is I'm happy to see what we'll get in response to this. I'd like to see what the proposals are. I think we'll benefit from getting proposals in response to the zoning. I don't think it costs us anything to go through the process of reviewing any proposals that come in. I don't think there's a material risk that the buildings are going to fall down in the next year, or that we're going to have some major problem. And so I do think it's worthwhile to take the next step and see what comes in and evaluate those at the time. I think that there's not a lot lost to the town at all. And I think if we don't go ahead with it, I think the biggest issue here, but as I see this article, right, as I see the decision we have to make at the town meeting, is the question is really whether the people of the town value the campus and the buildings or not. Because I think if people in the town value the campus and the buildings, we're not going to get a better plan that preserves the campus and the buildings. And I think that is if you had to, as I read the plan, as I think of the plan in a big picture, I think the overarching value of the plan is the preservation of the campus and the buildings. It's the idea that this particular array of buildings set out as it is, the exteriors of the buildings, the structures of the buildings, and of the site has value in and of itself. And that we're in the sort of the adaptive reuse parlance, we're taking historic buildings and adaptively reusing them because we value the campus and value the buildings. I think everyone would agree that if there were no buildings on this property, this is not the proposal that we'd be making. I think that you would not draw this up from scratch if this had not been laid out this way when the hospital was developed. And so I do think this is a value judgment for the people of the town. And appropriately made by town meeting. And the question really is, how much do you value the campus? How much do you value the buildings? And I think if you value them enough that you want to have a shot at preserving them, I think people ought to vote in favor of this article to give us a shot. Because for all the concerns that have been raised and identified, almost all of them are hypothetical at this point, in the sense that we haven't really looked at a concrete proposal in enough detail. For example, people have raised a lot of concerns about traffic, and traffic is certainly a concern with any development. What we don't know is how a particular developer who has a proposal is going to suggest mitigating any of those traffic concerns. Any developer who is sophisticated enough and well capitalized enough to spend, 6 figures on putting together a proposal is going to include in that proposal, how he or she plans to deal with whatever number of cars are going to be there. And it may involve installation of a traffic light someplace. It may involve some additional roads. Who knows what it will involve? And so I think to oppose the plan on the grounds of what you might think was the worst case scenario of what could happen, I think that would be voting no for the wrong reason. And I think if people are going to vote no, they ought to vote no kind of for the right reason, right? Because they either want no development at the property, which is a perfectly fine value to have, or they want a different kind of development. They want a lesser development. They don't see enough value in this overall plan, or they don't value the buildings and campus sufficiently enough to kind of move forward on a plan that has in it the sort of challenges and risks that we've all talked about and identified, and I won't rehash here. So with that framing, I do think there is enough value to the campus and to the buildings that it's worth finding out over the course of the next year what exactly a proposal would look like from a developer, to have a chance to evaluate it, and maybe my skepticism of this overall proposal will prove to be unwarranted. at that point, when we have an actual concrete proposal in response. And if it does prove to be warranted, I have sufficient confidence in the board and sufficient confidence in the town meeting that we're not going to be risking kind of marching into a second town meeting to vote for a plan that's not very good. And I certainly think all the three of us would never be making an argument like, well, the town meeting voted last year in favor of this, so we have to take the best of whatever plan comes forward. I think it's a very real chance that there's not going to be any proposal that comes in that's going to be sufficient to meet what's in the best interest of the town. And so I think that people should be prepared for that as well and recognize that I know for myself, and I assume for Gus and Pete, if there was no acceptable proposal that came in, we would just say no to them all and we'd come up with something else. I don't think we would just be picking, what is the best of the plans that meet this zoning proposal and meet this master plan, even if none of the plans actually is beneficial to towns, or all of them had significant risks and downsides. And so I think there's just to sum up, I think there's limited cost to voting yes. I think there'll be some cost spent in evaluating the proposals. It'll be a year taken doing it. I think the kinds of open questions that we have right now about the costs of infrastructure, the costs of rehabbing the buildings, the cost of demolition, we're going to learn more about that in getting actual proposals from actual developers who have to put their own money on the line in making these proposals. So I think even if we don't get a plan that ultimately satisfies the best interests of the town, it will be a worthwhile exercise. And I do think that if there is a no vote here, that's likely the end of any prospect of rehabilitating or preserving the buildings in the campus on a large scale. You might, in the long run, preserve some of the buildings, but you won't be preserving the whole campus. I suspect that any sort of fallback plan would either be, would probably be some mix of a lesser scale development with long-term demolition and removal of the buildings. And so I think it's worth taking a chance over the next year to see if we can get a proposal that will benefit the town of Medfield, that will mitigate whatever downsides. And so I'm going to vote in favor of this, and I think the town meeting should vote in favor of it too.
Okay, thanks. You have any questions for Mike P?
Questions? No.
I have one question for you, Mike, on, and you don't have to answer it if you have a reason you don't, but you'd asked, that Todd had asked you to issue a position statement. I'm curious when and what I'm trying to really figure out is the dynamics of the debate that goes on before the town meeting. So the reason I'm asking you is just to understand what messages come out in what ways and what directions,
Yeah.
what audiences.
So I'm going to send it out to my email list.
Okay.
And post it on my Facebook page and my Twitter. And I've started writing it, and he and I talked about this about 10 days ago because he knows that I have a little different take on it than both of you, and he thought it would be helpful to lay that out ahead of the town meeting. And so I think it'll be similar to what I just said. It'll probably be a little bit wordier. I'll try to make it not too much wordier, but it will be the basic message about how I see, which again I know that not everyone agrees with, how I see this vote is framed and how to think about it, and what the consequences are of a yes vote, what the consequences are of a no vote, and what I see as kind of what the substance of the debate ought to be, to make sure we're not making a decision that either boxes us in in the future or is premised on kind of an unrealistic alternative, right? I mean, you don't want to have a decision on something like this, which is purely regulatory, based on either what you see as the worst case scenario for a hypothetical development, or what you see as the best case scenario for an alternative that hasn't been vetted or tested. I mean, one of the advantages and the disadvantages of this particular master plan is that it has been analyzed to death over the course of a number of years, and so it's, for people who are critics of it, it's the more time you spend with it, you can always find more flaws. In the same way, the more time you spend with it, you can find more advantages to it. And so when you're debating something that's concrete, like this zoning proposal, versus something that is hypothetical, sometimes the hypotheticals are easier to stomach because you can just imagine an alternative that you like better, and you could have 50% of the people broken into 25 groups of 2% who each have a different hypothetical that they think will be preferable to this. And so I think we do have to focus on what we're actually deciding here, and then what the short and long-term consequences are of voting yes and voting no. And I think the short-term negative consequences of voting yes are relatively modest. And the reality is the long-term consequences of voting no, if you're someone who places value in the buildings and places value in the current campus layout, are significant, because that likely will bring to an end the idea of kind of a repurposing and reconstruction of the entire campus. So I think that's the thrust of the message. It's and so.
Pete, any comments on the article?
I generally agree with what you say, Mike, and I think that I see the zoning article as a necessary step for the town to get the answers that we still want to get, really, which are, what are developers thinking of this proposal? And unless we take, I see this approving the zoning, we've been told by the experts, Steve Nolan told us here when he reported to us a long time ago, that we had to pass the zoning in order to have it be attractive to developers. The committee has told us, reiterated that same thing. The development committee has reiterated the same thing. And that in order for the town to get any reading as to what potential developers would do with this site, we need to pass the zoning. So I see it as just a ministerial step along the way to getting the real answers that we want, which is, what is the market interested in and willing to do with this site? That we've come up with a general plan, and we need to actually pass this zoning so that we can get the real answers from the developer community as to what they would actually do for us in exchange for this site. So I'm very interested to see those actual proposals and to see what developers are actually going to tell us about. So that's why I think we need to go ahead and pass the zoning and get on to that final step, which is what we really want to see, is what sort of proposals we're going to get back. So, and I agree with Mike's evaluation of where we are, that I started out this process thinking that the buildings were way beyond repair, and I was pleasantly surprised to discover that they actually could be salvaged, probably. And I think that the responses that we got from the request for information from companies that do historic redevelopment indicated that they're probably not beyond repair, and with the historic tax credits that it can be accomplished. I happen to like the buildings. I had thought that it was just going to be too expensive to keep them. But I agree with Mike's evaluation that if we don't proceed with the zoning change, that the buildings probably are going to be history, that they're just not going to be salvageable. And so I think if people like the buildings, this is their chance to have the buildings kept. As Mike says, as you study the zoning, there are always things that you think could be better, but this is the consensus. This is how our democracy works. Our committees come up with this proposal, and so that this is what we're going to go forward with. And I think it certainly is a comprehensive, well thought out proposal, and I'm very interested to see what sort of developer responses we get to it when we get to that stage.
Questions for Pete?
No.
I don't have any. I have a few reactions to what was said. First off, I don't think the three selectmen are actually very far apart in our view about the upcoming special town meeting. We may have some differences in our relative optimism or pessimism that the course will work, but I think we all are bringing doing our best to bring an objective perspective into whatever comes out here. I think we share an interest in wanting to move ahead with getting approval of the zoning change, because we see the actual submission of proposals being the real acid test of whether this is practical or not. And I think we all feel that same way. I don't think any of us are prepared, and you can push back on this, but I'm just trying to make some summary points. I don't think any of us are prepared to make a case that the taxpayers should donate, or I guess donate's the right word, gobs of money to ensure developers make money on a project that's a dog. And the challenges to the current master plan, the preferred scenario, are largely around either the collateral costs or the ultimate costs of the project if it actually gets played out. And I think we're all mindful of that. So I don't actually think our fundamental position or even our fundamental perspective on this vote really differs very much. Perhaps our anticipation of what might come out of it varies on the pessimism-optimism scale. I think Mike brought up an important point, that if this is bare land, we wouldn't choose to put up a bunch of 19th century buildings. We wouldn't put as many buildings up. We wouldn't put them in the nature of what they are up there. So very much this vote for the town is more than a mere mercenary real estate transaction decision about what's the maximum value we can get with whatever it turns out to be. I think there is something that weighs in what went into the town's preferred scenario that reflects values that we believe a good number of people in town place on the town's history, on preserving, if feasible, the historic buildings, because that's something that is part of Medfield's history, and if there's a way we can keep that history alive in a way that makes sense, and we can get the site to a purpose that is meaningful to the town, not merely as some sort of a museum that only the small segment of historic aficionados that enjoy touring old state hospitals would be interested in visiting. We need to find a good purpose for the town that serves its purpose. If we can do that, then there are more reasons than mere economics to pursue this, as long as the economics aren't prohibitive. On the issue of economics, the one thing, every time we talk about this, I want to remind the public that when the town bought the property for $3.1 million, the town assumed the liability for the remediation or demolition of the buildings. The current estimate of that, and it's being refined, but the current estimate of doing that is $25 million. So we need to understand that cost is there. It may not ultimately turn out to be that much, and if it does turn out to be that much and we demolish everything, it's possible that we would sell some land off and we would net out a lower cost than that $25 million. My point is, don't forget that liability is there on the town as you think about the situation. I also wouldn't make any assumptions about what our fallback will be if the zoning vote, if the zoning article does not pass. I've read with some amusement 2 projections by people who had absolutely no knowledge or basis of telling what the Board of Selectmen would do if this does not pass. One suggested we were going in one direction, one suggested in the other. Neither one has a clue. As the chair of the Board of Selectmen, I thought it was funny to hear that, but I think it's important for the townspeople to understand that even on this Board of Selectmen, we probably do not share a perspective on what we would do going forward from here. I doubt you'll see us try to replicate and go through the kind of extensive process that we use to get to this preferred plan, because if this worked properly, then this preferred plan reflects the broad consensus of what people in the town value, and that should be reflected at least in a willingness to let the zoning article move forward. If we couldn't even get that close to what people in town wanted, then we probably aren't going to go through that process again and spend another $500,000 asking the same questions. And
I'm curious as to what those alternatives were, Gus. I had not seen any of this. So
one alternative suggested that we would basically go through this process again and ask the questions again to see if we get a different answer, and that's dead wrong. The other projection said that the Board of Selectmen were going to be pursuing a smaller RFP next spring. That is dead wrong. And in fact, if the zoning doesn't pass, as a practical matter, we don't have the zoning even to do that, even if we chose to. So I haven't actually appreciated the misinformation speculating on the Board of Selectmen's actions, but I have also been amused by it, as long as nobody counts on any of that to be reality. The last point that I would make
It's
is
probably the Russians that are doing it, Gus.
could even be bots. It was some people who should have known better. To Pete's point, there's one other piece of this. Some years ago, I had an opinion at one point about what the hospital what we should do there. And early on in this process, I threw that away and said, actually, I live fairly close to the hospital. I would just like it resolved. Whatever we decide to do, rather than having this looming, slowly deteriorating site within walking distance of my house, I'd rather have it get turned into something. In the process, and I've been involved, and sometimes officially, sometimes unofficially, and sometimes maybe my involvement was appreciated and sometimes my involvement was not. I have come away with an appreciation that there are people who have lots of opinions and they go in opposite directions. So there's some opinions say don't develop it, there are some that say we haven't developed it enough. So to Pete's point, this master plan, which this zoning is intended to support, is a pretty decent result of a long and hard effort, primarily by the the State Hospital Master Planning Committee, trying to listen to a lot of conflicting views and trying to figure out how to reconcile, compromise, file down the differences to get to something that was their best idea of what they thought was the core of what the town wanted. I would ask all the people in the town, as you think about this, first off, to recognize that the zoning article is not the last vote you get on this. But secondly, to the extent you have specific opinions about particular aspects of the plan, recognize that there are other people in town who have the exact opposite opinions of those specific aspects of the plan. So as you think about it broadly in terms of what you believe will be best for the town. Don't latch on to a single issue that's a big issue for you and kind of like ride it into the ground if you don't get your way on that one issue. That's all I have. Do we have comments from the floor? Hearing none, I guess we'll entertain it.
I would move that we support the second article.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Okay, that one passes.
At least
And
here. 9 o'clock on a Thursday morning.
this is when we're at our best. This would have taken a lot longer to get through this. Yes. Okay. So we voted on the articles, and we need to vote to sign the warrant.
Vote to sign the warrant.
I move to sign the warrant.
Aye, second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
That's done.
And when will this be hitting mailboxes throughout town?
Should be in about a week.
About a week. Okay.
And then before we close,
Needs to be posted 14 days before the meeting.
Posted, but
Posted.
you mean like posted?
he's talking about the mail.
I'm talking about when
Yeah.
people can
Right.
expect to receive this in their mailbox.
That's
Shortly, and we should have it on the website by tomorrow afternoon.
Terrific.
Okay. Before we close out, I had an administrative question. Did we approve the December 18th, 2018 minutes?
I'm still waiting for comments from you, I believe.
Oh, from me? I'm
Yeah.
the only one?
Looks like you might have some.
Well, the only thing I noticed, so the one that caught my eye was that it said
The year was wrong?
2019. Unless we're projecting what the December 18th, 2019 meeting is going to result in. And then if that's the case, I probably should send that to you electronically, but you can
That
just
would be
have
great.
that.
Thank you.
And that's it. And then for our next town meeting, our next Board of Selectmen meeting, we were trying to get the water and sewer, Bill Harvey in, and Mo, I understand you're out of town, but does it look like we'll be able to get Bill in for that?
Maurice is working on that.
Okay. Mo, I think the conversation that we need to have in the meeting, in our meeting, is very similar to the conversation that we had at the warrant committee meeting, so the issues are all the same. But I'd kind of like to, there's been enough confusing messages that have drifted into the Board of Selectmen. I want to make sure that there's no confusion and that we know what we would tell the townspeople if they ask us questions about where we're taking this during the special town meeting. All right.
Does this relate to water and sewer on the hospital property?
Well, yeah, I
I
guess.
must have missed something.
Well, it does, but it's not just the hospital. It relates to the total impact of development of the state hospital on the infrastructure costs within town, both from a capacity standpoint and an infrastructure investment standpoint, and where we stand as of the 18th of November in anticipation that some people would like to know, recognizing that we won't have complete answers on all of that, partly because we don't actually have the specific proposal, but there's, it's part of this is giving what answers we have, and part of it is explaining what process we're following to move forward to answer those questions.
Have we gotten the answers back from Pear yet?
Is this on? Thanks. We have our consultant engineering partners, environmental partners, that is doing a desktop study for the Medfield State Hospital with the water and sewer capacity issues. They are running a little behind because one of the engineers unfortunately fell sick. They should have something to us either by tomorrow or first of next week, but we do have some points that I could send to you guys by email, so you can read that over. We did talk a little bit about it at the warrant committee meeting. PAR and Environmental Partners Group have collaborated on this already, so they have the same numbers that they're working with. So that'll give you a little bit of an idea of where we stand town-wide as far as water and sewer. But there's certain caveats to each one of those, of what we need to do and what we're doing for future. So that'll be a final report given within the next, hopefully the next few days.
The key point here is that people obviously want to know as much as they can before they vote on the 18th, and people definitely need to know all the answers. If this passes on the 18th and we actually do get a development proposal before anybody should be expected to vote to approve a specific proposal, those are questions that we need to definitely know the answers to.
Right.
So it's just to make sure that
Okay.
that's
And that could be,
on track.
that could be an input, it probably would be an input in the RFP.
Yeah.
We'd be
yeah.
asking, you know,
Yep.
here's the costs, or how do you propose to deal with these costs?
And I think that is all that I needed to talk about.
Anything else in particular? Tuesday is not the warrant hearing, right? Tuesday's
No,
not the
we're gonna
budget
do
hearing.
that December 3rd.
December 3rd, okay.
Say that again?
No, I was asking if it was the warrant, the budget hearing, you know, the
Oh,
warrant
oh,
budget
oh,
hearing.
okay,
It's usually the
okay.
first Tuesday in November, but I think given the special town meeting,
Yeah.
I recall
Okay.
that.
That makes sense. Anything else you want to bring up?
You have a question?
Yeah,
Yes.
I just had a process question.
Microphone.
Thank you for the reminder. Teresa James, 67 Harney Street. Just a process question regarding special town meeting. Gus, are you giving one statement on behalf of all the Board of Selectmen, or each one of you going to be making statements that night?
I'm open to, right now, I think I went into it thinking that only one of us would make a statement, but I'm open to whatever my colleagues would prefer.
I think the less talking by all of us, the better, and let people.
So you're
who-
suggesting I shouldn't be the one?
No. No, I was referring to Pete and myself. That if one person's going to, I mean, I don't know what the what the plans are for the main presentation of the plan. I assume that's being worked out, but I don't think we'd have each of us going by Waldorf and Statler style weighing in. I think we'd want after the main presentation. I don't know if there's going to be another presentation as well. I don't know.
We're
what
working through the
Yeah,
process
so
with the
whatever the
moderator.
moderator figures out, I would think the fewer additional comments from people who've already had a chance to sort of weigh in substantively in advance of the meeting, the better, to let people have the maximum time for debate and discussion and questions and all that.
I think listening to the three of us this morning, I mean, we're going to be fairly repetitive if we each spoke, so I think it wouldn't add much to have three of us.
So I will listen to what the three of us said and do my best to be more concise in the statement where we all said the same thing. Okay. Any other questions? Any other topics? Any other topics?
Nope.
Well, there are lots of other topics, but nothing's on the agenda.
Anything else we're going to cover on Tuesday beyond water and sewer and?
Yeah, you have a few things. We're gonna finalize 39 Quarry Road. We have the rail trail leases, and you will go forward with the RFP for the cell towers as well.
We could have an abbreviated selectmen's report and ask you all to reveal what costumes you'll be wearing tonight, but. Evelyn looked up.
Do you want the Needham signed lease rail trail to review in advance of the meeting, if you haven't already?
Sure.
Sure, yeah.
I can forward it to you
Yeah.
tomorrow.
Great.
Super. Thanks, Mark.
Newton must have one, too.
What?
Newton must have one, too.
Apparently, it either hasn't been signed or Christian couldn't obtain it, but he did send me the
Oh.
signed Needham one. So, it's pretty identical to the one being proposed for us. Doesn't appear that they negotiated out anything, so.
And just as to the special town meeting, have we found a understudy for Mark?
We are working on that.
Okay.
Mark's going to be working on that today.
Okay. For those of you who don't know, Mark is the Medway town moderator, and he will be moderating the town meeting of Medway that night of our special town meeting. So we are trying to find some pale imitation of Mark Sorrell to provide legal advice as needed during the special town meeting.
Alternatively, there probably could be a moderator who could step in for Mark Medway if we.
There is no provision.
Trust me, I've already checked.
I have a feeling. Well, I bet you Scott McDermott is scouring the rules to see if there's a way we could trade. And Mark can be both lawyer and moderator for the night.
40-some-odd page charter, and they don't have provision for a alternate or assistant moderator.
How about Skyping in?
Well, your town meetings usually only last about 25 minutes. So
Good.
there's a
Possible.
chance you can be back to our town meeting before Gus is done with his opening statement. And we'll have no issue.
Just give me guidance, Mark. Give me how much time you need. All right. I don't think we have any more business. We have a motion to close. Adjourn. Yes?
Yep.
Aye, second.
All those in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks for coming, everyone.
You're watching Medfield TV.